I've practiced medicine for over 4 decades. 40 years of listening to heartbeats, holding hands in hospital rooms, and walking alongside both healing and loss. Over the years, I've said goodbye to many people. Some who left suddenly and others who simply faded. Not because of some great illness or accident, but quietly, gradually, without anyone truly understanding why. They seemed healthy. They followed the rules. They didn't smoke. They ate well. They saw their doctors. And yet, they didn't live past 85. That question has stayed with me as I've grown older myself. Why do so many people pass before 85, even when nothing appears to be wrong? Today I want to share with you 6 things I've seen again and again, not just in test results or medical charts, but in the silences between conversations, in the quiet regrets whispered near the end, and in the lives of those who, against all odds, lived longer and lived well. These aren't textbook lessons. They are the lived truths of people I call the silent masters of longevity. 1. The silent decline from inactivity. Of all the causes of early decline I've witnessed, this one is perhaps the most underestimated. It doesn't come with warning sirens or flashing symptoms. It begins in the smallest, most innocent ways. A skipped morning walk, a quiet afternoon that turns into a sedentary week. I've seen it unfold not through illness but through stillness, and the body, I've learned, adapts far more quickly to stillness than we realize. Muscles lose their memory, joints tighten, balance falters, the breath shortens. What once felt effortless, climbing stairs, reaching overhead, rising from a chair, becomes something we hesitate to attempt. And as the physical self shrinks inward, so does the sense of freedom. Independence erodes. The world becomes smaller, one forgotten movement at a time. You remember Robert? 74 years old, retired, a former forest ranger who once hiked daily through Colorado trails. After retirement, he told himself he deserved rest. The walk stopped. The television stayed on longer. Within 2 years, he struggled to climb the stairs in his own home. By 76, he had his first fall. His decline didn't come from disease, but from disuse. What turned things around was not a grand medical intervention. It was standing up every hour, walking gently around the block and stretching each morning as the sun rose. His muscles reawakened, but more than that, his spirit did. You see, movement is not just about fitness. It's the body's quiet way of staying engaged with life. It tells your cells, your nerves, your bones, we are still needed here. Longevity is not about intense workouts or pushing like a young athlete. It's about showing up daily with small, consistent signals to the body that say, I'm still in this with you. Even 10 minutes of intentional walking, a bit of resistance band work, or simply standing during a phone call. These aren't minor gestures. They are affirmations of life. And the truth is, once we surrender movement, the rest follows. Cognition, circulation, resilience. But if you choose to move, even just a little, you are choosing to stay connected. You are choosing to stay alive in the fullest sense. Not merely breathing, but living is poor. The hidden damage of poor sleep. Sleep, in the later chapters of life, becomes a battleground few talk about and fewer still understand. It's easy to dismiss poor sleep as an inevitable side effect of aging. The tossing and turning, the frequent bathroom trips, the strange dreams that leave us waking more exhausted than when we lay down. But in my years of practice, I've seen how chronic sleep disruption becomes one of the most silent yet devastating thieves of longevity. It does not make headlines on medical charts, and yet it infiltrates every system the body relies on. Memory begins to blur, blood pressure creeps higher, immunity weakens, and mood becomes a shadow of what it once was. Unlike a broken bone or a diagnosis, poor sleep doesn't cry out. It whispers, slowly unraveling the body's capacity to repair, to regulate, to restore. As I recall Joan, 76, a retired teacher from Oregon, who came to me complaining of low energy, anxious moods, and an unexplainable rise in her blood sugar. She had no idea that the fragmented sleep she had been tolerating for years was undermining her entire system. It wasn't until a sleep study revealed mild sleep apnea that we understood the root. With simple changes, avoiding screens before bed, stretching gently in the evening, cooling the bedroom and using a gentle breathing aid, her nights transformed, and with them so did her days. Her alertness returned, her anxiety lessened, even her blood sugar steadied. What many don't realize is that sleep is not a passive act. It is a form of deep cellular labor. During those hours, the brain detoxifies, the heart resets, and the immune system recalibrates. And when those hours are fractured or shallow, the damage compounds, not all at once, but slowly, irrevocably. I often tell my patients, do not ignore your sleep. If your nights are restless, if you snore, wake gasping, or feel heavy-eyed every afternoon, do not chalk it up to age. Investigate it. Honor it. Because long life is not just about how many days you are given. It is about the clarity, strength, and presence you bring to each of those days. And nothing restores that better than deep, undisturbed rest. In the quiet hours of night, the body does its most sacred work. And when we protect that space, we are in truth protecting our future. 1. The hidden danger of chronic loneliness. If there is one condition I've seen more deadly than high blood pressure, more corrosive than sugar in the bloodstream, it is loneliness. The kind that settles deep in the chest and silently starves the heart. And it's not always the loneliness that comes from being physically alone. In fact, some of the loneliest people I've met were still surrounded by family, still living in communities, still waving politely to neighbors. But beneath those polite greetings is often a quiet erosion, the sense that one is no longer truly seen, no longer vital to someone else's world. The world which once called upon them now passes them by. And as I've watched in clinical rooms, waiting areas, and living rooms, I've come to understand loneliness in old age doesn't just hurt emotionally. It kills, slowly but profoundly. It increases inflammation, weakens immunity, disrupts sleep, accelerates cognitive decline, and often leads to early death. But it does all this quietly, without a single lab result shouting its name. There was a man named Edward, 81, a widower from Michigan. A proud veteran, once a vibrant member of his local veterans club, always ready with a story and a joke, always the first to help younger men adjust to civilian life. But after a hip surgery, he stopped showing up. First it was the pain, then the fatigue, then the subtle embarrassment of walking slower, forgetting names. Weeks turned to months. He told me the only conversations he had some days were with the grocery store cashier. He said it with a smile, but I saw the tremble underneath. His body began to reflect his withdrawal. Weight loss, declining mood, missed medications. One day I gently suggested a community walking group, low pressure, just once a week. He hesitated. He said, "I don't know anyone there anymore." But a month later he went, and that one walk led to another. The movement helped, yes, but what really saved him was the laughter. The feeling of being included again, however imperfectly. 6 months later, his blood pressure had improved, his eyes were brighter. He had even started organizing the weekly meetups himself. You see, human beings are not meant to live in isolation, not emotionally, not biologically. Our nervous systems respond to connection the way our lungs respond to air. When we lose that, we begin to suffocate, slowly. But what I've learned is this: connection does not need to be grand. It doesn't require dozens of friends or constant visitors. It might be a neighbor you wave to, a weekly phone call with a sibling, a shared cup of tea with someone from church. These seemingly small acts trigger powerful biological responses, reduce stress hormones, steadier heart rhythms, restored sleep cycles. When the body feels connected, it feels safe. And when it feels safe, it fights to stay alive. So if you find yourself withdrawing, not out of choice, but out of quiet surrender, I urge you to take one small step outward. a call, a walk, an invitation. Because the truth is, the people who live longest are not the ones who avoid illness at all costs. They are the ones who remain woven into the world, even with shaky hands, even with fragile hearts, even after loss. They stay connected, and through that connection, they stay alive. F4. The slow erosion from nutrient-poor diets. One of the most deceptive dangers I've witnessed in older patients is not what they eat too much of, but what they slowly stop feeding their bodies altogether. Over time, as taste fades and appetite wanes, many elders begin to substitute meals with what is quick, soft, familiar. Toast, crackers, processed snacks, cereal. These choices feel harmless. Some even feel comforting, tied to memory or routine. But what I've learned time and time again is that under this quiet shift lies a deepening nutritional deficit. Not one that shows up dramatically overnight, but one that chips away at vitality day by day. Our bodies do not stop needing nutrients just because we age. In fact, the older we grow, the more precise and essential those nutrients become. For the brain, the bones, the blood, the immune system, and yet so many older adults walk around slowly starving themselves without even realizing it, not of calories, but of sustenance. Barbara, 79, was a patient who'd been in and out of my clinic for fatigue, lightheadedness, and what she called foggy mornings. She was always pleasant, always trying her best. She assumed her tiredness was just part of growing older. But something didn't sit right. We ran a few blood panels, and there it was: vitamin B12 deficiency, critically low vitamin D, and iron barely above threshold. When we sat down to talk, I asked about her meals. She said she often skipped lunch, and for dinner, she'd eat some white bread with butter and a little soup. "It's easy," she said, "and I don't really feel hungry anyway." Her words echoed what I had heard so many times before, the quiet resignation that comes not from laziness, but from not knowing what the body still cries out for. We began slowly, adding spinach to her scrambled eggs, a B12 supplement, a walk under the morning sun. Within a few weeks, she returned and said, "Doctor, I feel like I got my legs back." Her clarity sharpened, her gait steadied, and perhaps most importantly, her sense of self began to return. Nutrient loss rarely comes with a headline. It comes with subtle changes, a little more fatigue, a little more irritability, small memory lapses, weakened resistance to colds. But the root cause often lies in the quiet erosion of dietary quality. Processed foods are easy. Yes, they're soft, shelf-stable, affordable, but they are hollow. And for a body in its 7th or 8th decade of service, hollowness simply won't do. Real nourishment, from leafy greens, legumes, berries, oily fish, fermented vegetables, whole grains, and clean proteins, doesn't just preserve the body, it revives it. It restores bone strength, keeps inflammation at bay, supports memory, sharpens mood, and sustains energy. I often remind my patients, every bite you take is either feeding disease or feeding resilience. And though the hands may shake more now when peeling an orange or lifting a saucepan, every act of feeding the body well is also an act of profound self-respect, because even when the appetite dims, the body still wants to live. It just needs the tools to do so, and food is among the most powerful tools we have. 5. The overlooked risks of overmedication. In all my years of practice, I've come to believe that one of the most complex and quietly dangerous aspects of aging is not disease itself, but the way we treat it, or rather, over-treat it. There is an assumption, deeply embedded in both patients and physicians, that more medication means more care, more control, more safety. But the reality is far more fragile. Over time, what begins as 1 or 2 prescriptions to manage blood pressure or cholesterol often snowballs into a list of 8, 10, even 12 daily pills, each prescribed by a different specialist, each targeting a symptom that may in fact be a side effect of another drug. And the body, once able to adapt and process these interventions, grows weary. Kidneys strain, Blood pressure drops too low, memory becomes cloudy, gait becomes unsteady, and before long I see the cascade. A fall, a hospitalization, a confusion that no one can explain except that it was written quietly in a list of medications that had grown too long and too unchecked. I remember George well. He was 82, a retired accountant from Florida with a kind demeanor and a fading spark in his eyes. His daughter brought him in one day, concerned that he seemed forgetful, unsteady on his feet, and increasingly withdrawn. He was taking 12 different medications at the time, some prescribed years ago, others more recently. Most never reviewed in full. When I sat with him and went through each bottle, heart pills, sleeping aids, a muscle relaxant, a statin, even an anti-anxiety tablet he couldn't recall the reason for, it became clear that his body was overwhelmed, not with illness but with the treatment of it. I collaborated with a clinical pharmacist, and over several weeks we carefully began to reduce and simplify his regimen. We kept what was essential and removed what was outdated, duplicated, or unnecessary. The change was not immediate, but it was profound. His steadiness returned, his mind cleared, and in his own words, he felt like someone took the fog out of the room. You see, the danger of overmedication is that it mimics aging itself. When someone becomes drowsy, forgetful, dizzy, or frail, it is easy to blame the passing years, but in many cases, the culprit is not time, it is chemistry. Our bodies change with age. The liver processes drugs more slowly, the brain becomes more sensitive, and the margin for error narrows. A dosage that was safe at 60 may be harmful at 80, and yet, unless we ask the right questions, unless we demand periodic reviews, the medications often remain unchanged, layering over one another like dust on an old shelf. This is why I always tell my patients and their caregivers to bring in everything once a year. Every prescription, every supplement, every over-the-counter pill. Lay it all out. Ask, do I still need this? Is there a safer alternative? Is this treating a cause or a side effect? Because every pill should have a purpose, and if that purpose is no longer serving you, then that pill may be doing more harm than good. Longevity is not about rejecting all medicine. It's about using it wisely, intentionally, and with respect for the changing needs of an aging body. It is about remembering that less, when chosen with care, can often mean more. More clarity, more energy, more time spent living rather than managing. 6. The quiet danger of losing purpose. If I could choose only one predictor of longevity, one thread that seems to quietly tie together those who live well into their late 80s, 90s, even beyond, it would not be blood pressure or cholesterol or even diet. It would be purpose. A reason to wake up. A sense that one's life still carries weight, still matters, still reaches into the world, however modestly. I have seen time and time again that the body begins to shut down long before death arrives, not because of disease, but because the spirit has gone dim. You can see it in the way someone stops looking forward to things, the way they speak less of tomorrow, the way their eyes drift when you ask them what brings them joy. Purpose is not loud. It doesn't always come in grand ambition. For the elderly especially, it is often small, sacred, and deeply personal. Tending a garden, teaching a grandchild how to sew, feeding the birds, showing up to a prayer group, checking on a neighbor who forgets things. It is these quiet acts that tell the body, you are still needed. Stay a little longer. I remember Helen, 78, from North Carolina. Her husband of 52 years had passed away, and though her children called often and her needs were provided for, she told me something I've never forgotten. She said, "I wasn't sick, doctor. I just felt like nothing belonged to me anymore." For months, she moved through her days in silence, eating less, walking less, sleeping more, but never waking rested. She declined, not from illness, but from the subtle erosion of meaning. Then one day, during a visit to the library, she saw a sign asking for volunteers to help with a children's reading program. She hesitated. but something stirred. 2 weeks later, she began coming in once a week, then twice. Within a month, her appetite returned, her posture lifted. She began arriving early just to chat with the librarian. And one afternoon, with tears in her eyes, she told me, "For the first time in over a year, I felt like I was living again, not just remembering what life used to feel like." Purpose, I have learned, is not a luxury. It is a biological necessity. The nervous system, the immune system, even the heart, they all respond to whether or not you feel that your life still has rhythm, relevance, connection. When that connection is lost, the body becomes disoriented. It no longer knows what it's striving for. But the beauty of purpose is that it can be reawakened at any age. I have seen men in their 90s build birdhouses for the neighborhood. I have seen women in their 80s become the emotional anchors of their church community. And I have seen patients on the edge of despair return to life simply because someone reminded them that their presence, their stories, their smile, their wisdom still matter. So, I say this to every elder and to every caregiver who loves one. Do not underestimate the power of having something to offer. Encourage it, honor it, create space for it, because the people who live the longest are not always the strongest in body or the wealthiest in means. More often, they are the ones who still feel they have a role to play, a connection to uphold, a reason, however small, to greet the day. And so, as we come to the end of this conversation, I ask you to pause with me. Not in fear, not in regret, but in reverence. Aging, in truth, is not something that happens to us. It's something we live through one breath, one morning, one small decision at a time. And over the course of my life in medicine, what I've come to understand is this. People do not simply pass away because of disease or accident. Many pass away because the threads that once held them close to life, movement, rest, connection, nourishment, clarity, and meaning have quietly frayed, sometimes without them even noticing. But here is the greater truth. Those threads can be mended, even late in life, especially late in life. If you've recognized yourself in these stories, if you've ever skipped a walk and didn't go back, accepted poor sleep as normal, allowed loneliness to settle in, eaten less not because of fullness but indifference, stayed on a pill without questioning why, or woken up wondering what the day is even for, then I want you to hear this. It is not too late. Not to change, not to heal, not to re-enter the world even in small, trembling steps. I have seen patients in their 70s and 80s reclaim their health, their joy, their sense of self, not through miracles, but through small, steady acts of remembering, my life still matters. I still belong here. Longevity is not won in a single choice. It is stitched slowly into the fabric of our days, in the quiet courage to move again, to reach out again, to nourish ourselves with care, to ask the right questions, to say, I'm not done yet. Because the people who live beyond 85, who live well, they are rarely the ones who never faced hardship or illness. They are the ones who, in the face of all of it, kept choosing to live with intention, with connection, and with heart. So wherever you are in your journey, whether you are 60 or 90, whether you feel strong or tired, I invite you to see this moment as a turning point. Not dramatic, not loud, but honest. What small thread can you pick up today? A phone call, a walk, a better meal, a conversation with your doctor, a reason to get up tomorrow. Start there. Life is not finished with you yet, and if you're still here, neither are you. Thank you for sitting with me through these reflections. May your days ahead be long, but more than that, may they be meaningful. You deserve nothing less.